We're going to play a game called Name That Heretic. I'll give you 2 blasphemous quotes and then provide you with 3 names, and you try to guess which heresy belongs to which heretic. Ready? Here we go. First quote. I used to believe that pagans in far-off countries were lost, were going to hell, if they did not have the gospel of Jesus Christ preached to them. I no longer believe that. Now for the second quote. We have to find more evidence of Christ's descent to hell. Nothing would have been accomplished if Christ had only endured physical death. In order to mediate between us and God's anger and satisfy his righteous judgment, he had to feel the weight of divine vengeance. From here, he also had to engage hand to hand with the powers of hell and the horrors of eternal death. Now that you've heard the quotes, here are your names to choose from. Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, or Creflo Dollar. Think you know who said what? What if I told you that none of these guys actually said these things? That first quote? Yeah, that was actually Billy Graham. The second one? John Calvin. Still think what was said is heresy? So right about now, you're probably wondering if the quotes are taken out of context or simply misunderstood. And that's good. We should always be willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. But here's a question. Were you ready to give the benefit of the doubt before or after you found out who actually said it? The cognitive dissonance we experience on issues like this is what's known as a genetic fallacy. And it happens when we judge a statement not on the basis of whether or not it's true, but the history or origin of the person who said it. See, for many, all the exposure they have to certain ministers is comprised almost entirely of short sound bites sandwiched between terms like heresy or another gospel. And once a minister gets labeled with one of these, it becomes extremely hard to evaluate them without a bias. Yet God tells us to do it. In 1 Thessalonians 5, he says to test all things. He doesn't say believe whatever you're told by your pastor or your friends about it. No, you do the work and you test it yourself. And you have to do it fairly too, because the Bible also says unjust scales are an abomination to the Lord. So can it be done? Yes. But is it easy? Not quite. But here are 4 practices that will help you increase your chances at being objective. Number 1, admit your bias up front. When you're conscious of a personal dislike for a certain Bible teacher, it's easier to catch yourself when you're being overly critical. By acknowledging this, you can then compensate with a little more patience. Number 2, hear it from them in its context and its entirety. We already know you can Google anyone's name along with the word heretic and get spoon-fed conclusions from critics. But when we take these and run with them, instead of looking more into it, we're not really being honest. Another thing to ask yourself is if you're even sure they still believe it. Some of the criticisms go all the way back to things said in the 80s, or even 70s. If you were even alive in the 80s, do you still believe all the same things you did back then? Probably not. People change, and if they haven't talked about it in at least the past 5 years, maybe they've changed too. Number 3, be willing to believe the best about them. Realize sometimes people don't talk the same way you or your favorite Bible teachers do. Sometimes it's the intent behind the words. Also, instead of assuming the worst possible implications, try to think of a context in which the statement might, in some ways, be true. Finally, find biblical criteria for what constitutes terms like different Jesus or heresy before making the accusation. We did an article about this a while back, and what we found is the standard is completely subjective. Most people I've talked to have no coherent way of determining why one incorrect statement would fall under the label of heresy and another as simply untrue or difference of opinion. The other odd thing about this is the way we give a pass to some teachers based on their prior record. How exactly does that work anyway? Because they were right 90% of the time and only said 1 or 2 heretical things, this means they're below the threshold for a false prophet? Where the heck does the Bible even say anything like that? So there's quite a bit here that not only needs to be cleared up, but also backed up with Scripture. We have a lot of work to do in this area. Many haven't even been exposed to this type of objective thinking. In fact, just by watching this video probably puts you in the minority. But the truth is, if we're really operating in love like we're supposed to, then we should already be doing these things. And that's really what it all boils down to. Love. Love for God, love for people, and love for truth.